Very worrisome development. NATO now investigating a cross-border clash between two of its own helicopters in Afghanistan and ground forces in neighboring Pakistan. It comes at a time of extreme tension between Pakistan and the United States over the raid on bin Laden's compound. CNN's Brian Todd is working this story for us. So, Brian, what do we know about this clash?
Wolf, we have information that NATO aircraft and Pakistani forces both fired shots in this incident. Whether they fired them directly and purposely at each other remains a bit unclear. But we are at a point where the anger and mistrust between the two sides are at a boil.
Pakistan's tensions with the West ratcheted up to military hostility. NATO helicopters engaged in an exchange involving Pakistani forces near the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. 2 Pakistani soldiers were wounded, and Pakistan's military has lodged what it calls a strong protest.
A NATO official says the incident occurred when coalition helicopters supporting forward operating base Tillman, which is inside Afghanistan but just a few miles from the Pakistan border, were flying in eastern Afghanistan. One official says this base had been receiving intermittent fire from across the border. A NATO official says the helicopters were fired on twice from the Pakistani side, and after the second time, they fired from across the border into this North Waziristan area of Pakistan.
Pakistani intelligence officials offer a different version. They say the incident started when a NATO fighter jet entered Pakistani airspace. The official said Pakistani troops fired on the jet from ground positions. They say the jet then retreated, returned with the NATO helicopters, and fired on a Pakistani position. That area is a flashpoint of militant activity and recent strain between the U.S. and Pakistan.
The majority of the drone strikes in Pakistan occur pretty much in this area here, which is home to both Al-Qaeda, e-Taiba, who are responsible for the Mumbai attacks, but also the Haqqani network.
The Haqqani network is a militant group allied with the Taliban. It's not clear whether the NATO aircraft were American. I asked analyst Jeffrey Dressler if Pakistani and Western forces might have a hair trigger in their current state of agitation.
Is the buildup, are the tensions between the two sides a direct byproduct of the raid on bin Laden's compound?
I don't think they're a direct byproduct. What we do know is that the army is feeling particularly tense right now, the Pakistani army, and tensions are running very high. But, I doubt that that was actually the rationale behind the incident that occurred at the border.
Dressler does point out that there have been deadly cross-border incidents in the recent past before that bin Laden raid. In September of last year, NATO helicopters crossed into Pakistani airspace from Afghanistan, chasing after insurgents. Dozens of people were killed in that incident, and Pakistan called that a breach of UN rules for foreign forces. As we mentioned earlier, NATO says it is investigating this incident. Wolf.
Brian, those NATO helicopters patrolling that area of the border, what's their mission?
Analysts say that's an area where the militants sneak across the border into Afghanistan to launch attacks on coalition forces. Then they sneak back into Pakistan. The coalition choppers and other forces are there to seal off that area, but it's always a flashpoint for skirmishes cross-border, as we mentioned that incident in September last year, and that's maybe how this escalated.
Brian Todd, thanks very much.